Welcome. Thank you for coming to today's program. My name is Chris Bercaw, and I'm a partner here at the Dorsey and Whitney law firm, and I'm a member of our international practice. Dorsey, for those of you who don't know, is a firm of 550 lawyers in about 20 locations around the world. Most of us are here in the U.S., but we've also got colleagues in China, in Europe, and in Canada. We are really pleased to co-sponsor this event with the Minnesota Trade Office and programs like this. Our topic today is doing business in today's Russia, practical considerations for Minnesota companies. Now, we hosted a similar program 2 years ago. The business climate was fraught then, but seems even more so now. But fortunately, we have a great group of speakers today, including my partner Larry Ward, who's here from Seattle, in our Seattle, Washington office, who can help us navigate the complexities of these issues. What's amazing to me is 2 years ago, when things were pretty hard, the sanctions had been put in place, we had a similar crowd of very interested people. I think there are a lot of us who want to do business with Russia, but unfortunately, politics and other things have gotten in the way. But there's still plenty of opportunity in the long run. My partner Larry Ward will speak after Matt Edwards, who's here from the International Trade Administration in the other Washington, our nation's capital. Matt is the director of the Office of Russia and the Ukraine and Eurasia director at the International Trade Administration in Washington. Following remarks from Matt and Larry, Tom Anson will lead a panel discussion. Tom is a diplomat in residence at the University of Minnesota, and he's the director of the Institute for Eastern Europe and Central Asia at the U of M. Finally, I'm pleased to introduce the organizer of this program, Nikolay Megits. Nikolay is the regional trade manager for Europe, Eastern Europe, and Central and South Asia at the Minnesota Trade Office, and he's an adjunct professor at Hamline University in St. Paul. Prior to joining the Minnesota Trade Office, Nikolay was managing director of the Institute of Eastern Europe and Central Asia, a think tank, and spent many years in the private sector with Target Corporation and several successful startup companies. Before Nikolay speaks, I would like to remind the lawyers in the audience that we have green sheets on the table for you to sign so that you can get continuing legal education credit for today's program. So Nikolay, thank you to you and to the Minnesota Trade Office for bringing us today's program.
Good morning, everybody. On behalf of Minnesota Trade Office, I really would like to thank you, the Dorsey staff, and personally Chris and all the guests who invited, and for finding a time in your busy schedule to come so earlier morning to listen and participate in discussion on such vibrant topics as doing business in today's Russia. As Chris already introduced, here our guest speakers and panelists, and you will find them very attractive on topics that your companies are so interested to be engaged, to learn what is happening in that part of the region. And we have, in addition to those who Larry introduced to you, I also would like to mention Matt Edwards, Larry Ward, Thomas Hansen, and Perry Davis is a special agent with the Office of Export Enforcement, Michael Brown. Michael Brown, if you can stand up, please. Yes, and Perry Davis, you are there behind, okay. And also we have Leo Gritchener. I'm not sure if I see Leo here. He will be a little bit late. He's a panelist, but he will be representing a Russian community here. We will learn from them what the Russian community has to do and in the business in Russia. And also Todd Lafko. He's here. Many of you know who is Todd. He's an expert on Russia as for many, many years. We have in Minnesota those many companies who are successful, more or less. You see is a list of those, some of them 500 Fortune companies, but dozens, maybe hundreds other smaller or bigger companies are going through similar processes and struggling quite often. What can be done, what shouldn't be done, and how to be, to be successful on the Russian or Eastern European market. And today we have some representative of those companies. We will have a great opportunity to learn from them. Preparing this event, I look on the statistics, and because we will have that discussion through this morning. And I want to show you those numbers, what that mean trade, export specifically from Minnesota, because the role of Minnesota Trade Office is to assist our companies to enhance our export activities from Minnesota to different countries of the world, and specifically in this case into Russia. And if you can see, after event of 2014, Russian annexation of Crimea, U.S. engaged and the European Union engaged in the sanctions against Russia, and we see the significant drop in the trade. We will have more talks about this, but if you pay attention in the red, numbers you see, they are dropping every year. And I remember sitting last year, two years actually ago, we had a guest from Washington, D.C., from U.S. Embassy, and they mentioned, sanctions are just a temporary thing, but it's not, actually it's not a temporary, it's just prolonged and getting worse and worse every other month. And we will see what that's happening. But our duty is to discuss and do whatever we can do to improve that trade activity, to improve export in a legal way from Minnesota to Europe. What's happened in the last few years? Everybody remember that reset story. Instead of reset, it's happened collapse. Okay, collapse because of different type of sanctions targeted against specific companies, specific people, specific sectors of industries. And that is so critical to understand, and I'm so happy that we have lawyers in this room, because our office quite often receive a call like this. Oh, we would like to export, just recently a real story happened to me a few days ago. We would like to export our agricultural machinery to Ukraine, but our freight forwarder told us Ukraine is under sanction. And it was like eye-opening for me. I said, where did you find it? And he showed me actually a piece of paper just on internet that says sanctions against Russia and Ukraine. And such things exist really in the U.S. regulation, the sanctions against Russia and Ukraine. But in Ukraine, they mean Crimea as a part of Ukraine. But today, I believe, and I hope that today's discussion will clarify so many of those obstacles and will provide you answer to many of those. It's hard, because if you can see this on the bottom, on the red, I said, as of September 2017, 385 Russian individuals, legal entities are under sanctions. And for you, it's how to find who they are. Can you trade with specific one or not? And people like Perry Davis and Larry and others will help us to find the answer to this question. But my biggest concern is, one of my concern is, because sanctions happen in the cause of annexation of Crimea and the Donbass region and Luhansk region, but look what's in, the cause was Ukraine, but look what's happening on statistic. Ukraine is actually trading with Russia. Ukraine is importing and exporting. Trade drastically dropped down between Russia and Ukraine. And as Ukrainian politicians are still talking today that Ukraine is in a war with Russia, or war between Russia and Ukraine exists, how company can trade? And Ukraine is still importing more from Russia than exporting to Russia. Why their trade activity is still going on? And specifically, if you look on this table, when you see that Russia is a #1 trading partner for Ukraine. Is that right, or is this something wrong here? And why United States is #6? If there is a war, it shouldn't be probably a trade. And if there is United States who have sanctions against Russia on a trade, How come Ukraine doesn't have those sanctions? And why U.S. citizens or U.S. companies have to pay a price for this if Ukrainian companies still actively trading? Not as much as it was 3-4 years ago, but still that trade is going on. My point is for U.S. government representative and for you companies representative, maybe it's time for us to move ourselves to position number 1 on a trade with Ukraine. Okay? And that is the topic of our discussions. What can be done by the U.S. companies, by Minnesota companies that would help United States to move ourselves from position number 6 to position number 1 and be number 1 U.S. trading partners. With all this said, I should say again, with love to Russia, we love you, but let's fix the problem and let's see what can be done to have this situation resolved and how Minnesota companies can be helped with the trade activities.